the problem that Gianfranco had as well was that I felt that his staff were probably underprepared. I think that went into some of the team a little bit. And as a player, you feel that, and it's hard to, if you're the lead, you're one of the players you're leading the group, it's hard to know where to steer the team. Is it that way? Is it this way? And who are you back in almost? Harry came in. I really liked Harry, but he had different thoughts of what the club, how they wanted to progress and how he wanted to do it. And they ended up signing 3 lads from Brentford, who actually, were really good players in their own right, but they're not the players that Harry had in his vision. He wanted to sign John Terry, Ashley Cole and Robbie Keane, So when you think of it like that, it's a different type of recruitment that happened.
Michael Morrison commenced his footballing journey with Cambridge United, exhibiting promise from a 10-year age. His rise to prominence commenced with Leicester City, where he played a pivotal role in their ascendance to the Championship. Following stints at Sheffield Wednesday and Charlton Athletic, Morrison established himself as a reliable defender, but it was at Birmingham City where he truly commenced his reputation. Initially arrived on loan, and swiftly became a main figure in the Birmingham defence, earning a permanent contract and even assuming the captaincy. His contribution at Blues were pivotal, earning his acclaim from fans and peers alike. Following Birmingham, Morrison played for Reading and Portsmouth and has now returned to his origins, rejoining Cambridge United, where he continues to exhibit his prowess as an experienced centre-back. Now he's on this podcast sharing insights into his leadership styles, mental resilience and the lessons learned throughout his career. His story serves as a testament to dedication, perseverance and enduring passion for the beautiful game. Before this podcast begins, please do me a massive favour by clicking the subscribe button down below. It helps the channel grow. The bigger the channel, the bigger the guests, and it's free. Enjoy the episode. Obviously, in terms of you trying to make it as a footballer and that longevity that you've had within the game, can you reflect on that time and maybe share with listeners and viewers on a little bit of advice that was given to you that enabled you to kind of push on and have progression and have a little bit of longevity in the game?
I'm not sure if there was any one thing. I think over the years, as coming through an academy system or, through at the time it was the centre of excellence, you're preparing all that time to get into the first team. And at the time, we'd just been relegated from League Two into the conference. A lot of players had left. They shut the academy down for a period of time and they ended up keeping only a couple of the scholars. So you felt quite close to the first team. And I just gave it everything I had over the pre-season, and I ended up playing in the October, November when injuries happen and stuff like that happens within the course of the season. You always need a big squad, and obviously getting relegated, we didn't have that. But there wasn't a set thing that anybody ever said to me, like, you need to do this, do that, or that I can particularly remember. My family were really supportive. My dad, and he's always like, don't get too high and don't get too low, is probably something that I've taken throughout my whole career. I'm sure lots of people have heard that being said, but I think that's something that's helped with longevity. It's easy to get carried away with yourself and also easy to be too hard on yourself. And I think most players would say they're their own biggest critic. And it's just trying to keep as level as you can. And that's easier said than done.
How did you find playing down the leagues? You mentioned the conference. How did you find, integrating yourself in that?
Yeah. Well, I think it was all I knew. At 17, you break into the first team and it's your local club and everyone's buzzing for you to be at Cambridge United and playing, and that's all I knew. So, we used to train, we used to meet at the stadium, we used to drive around, we used to walk around or drive around to basically the local park and train and then come back. And that's all I knew. It wasn't until I left and signed for Leicester or I went on trial at a few other places, you realise actually there's an elite level that's, loads more steps higher than what you're playing at. And I suppose at the time you don't have Instagram. When I was coming through, it's not Instagram, the TV's not as, there's not as many games on TV. You're just thinking, right, all I wanted to do at 16, 17 was play for Cambridge, and right, that meant training there. And, that's good. I'm still training with the first team. I think now you look at it from a different perspective. You go, it's so far behind where the level is now. The improvement, I'm back at Cambridge now after, 18, 19 years, and the improvement from the facilities to the standard of football to the standard of coaching from that point to where it is now, it's night and day. But yeah, like I say, at the time, you don't realise that. You just think that's the normal. You think everybody's doing that. You think everybody's down the park and just training, and, obviously not the case. And I soon realised that as soon as I signed for Leicester.
I'm interested in how you adapt to that. You mentioned obviously the different styles, different methods that we use, and obviously from an educational point of view, we've more advanced in comparison to maybe previously. How did you adapt
to, you know, first team football and that expectation to perform at elite level and on a high level, and going into dressing rooms where there's senior members and you're trying to learn off, you know, different types of people with different types of leadership. Talk to me about that process and how you cope with that.
I think I was really lucky. Nigel Pearson was the manager at the time, and you know, obviously an ex-centre half. And he brought in a lot of young lads that were fearless at the time, and that's what Leicester needed. You know, they'd been relegated. There was a bit of a disconnection between the team, and when you were young, you know, by the time I got to Leicester, I was 20. I'd already played quite a few games in the conference, 100 games, but this is a different level. And I think the team was fearless and young and fearless, and we were all in it together. I had a few older heads. I mean, you can see the team behind me. You got Steve Howard there behind me. We had Andy King, Max Gradle, Jack Hobbs, you know, Alan Lloyd Dyer, Nicky Adams, who all got on and had great careers. You know, some top level. You know, Andy King winning the Premier League, some playing lots and lots of games in the Championship, some playing within League One, League Two, getting various promotions. Nicky Adams, absolute expert at getting out of League Two, still going. And we had a really, really good team, so that was really helpful. And then somebody on the biggest influence in my career from my younger days, from 20 to 26 probably, until I left Charlton, was Chris Powell. Sorry. And Chris, I played next to Chris for a good few years, and then he was the first team coach, and then he actually signed me at Charlton. And his belief in me and playing next to him and him giving me that support as a player, then as a coach and a manager was so vital for my career, and I owe so much to the grounding that he gave me.
Reflecting on that moment and that transition for you from Cambridge to Leicester, you know, when we think about obviously Leicester City in the position that we're in when you joined them, Michael, you know, League One football club, but had big fan base, big stadium, big expectations. How did you cope with that in terms of the pressures to try and perform week in, week out, see winning as a habit, and, you know, trying to get Leicester back to where they should be in terms of the higher pyramid of football? I'm just interested on how you cope with that from a leadership point of view and how you adapted with those expectations coming from Cambridge United.
I think when I was younger, I was just, you know, when you're 20, you get this move from Cambridge to Leicester, and at that point I'd been on trial a few places from Cambridge and not been signed. So I'd been to Newcastle and been up there for about 2 weeks. I was originally supposed to go for a week, and then a week later they asked me to stay up again. Glenn Rader was the manager, pulled me in the office. I thought I was going to sign, and then he come in and said, "Listen, you've done really well. I don't think you're quite as good as Rio Ferdinand, so I'm not going to sign you." And I look back now, I'm thinking, "Guy, when you comparing me to Rio Ferdinand, you're not going to sign too many centre halves if that's the level you're looking for." So I'd had a few experiences where I thought, "Oh, that might happen," and it didn't. So when Leicester came about and it did happen, I was really excited and really wanted to approach it with, "I'm going to give everything." We had pre-season, and they gave you, you know, a good 6 weeks to embed within the team and to get comfortable in the environment. I think if I'd have come in January or signed really late, that would have been a lot more difficult. But having the games and less pressure in these pre-season games and being around, going away on a pre-season tour, by the time the season started, I felt like a Leicester player. I felt comfortable. And I think you just don't realise the enormity of the club or how disconnected the fan base might be until you get there and it's going. You know, I hadn't even thought about it at my age at that time. That's not what you're thinking about. But when I reflect on it and think about it, I remember we played a local team. I can't remember the team off the top of my head. And it was the first pre-season game, and I was playing the second half, and the team that played the first half was losing 1-0, and the fans were booing. And I was like, it's a pre-season game, like, and we ended up winning 3 or 4-1 in the end, but that was how it was at the time. The club, the players and the players had to win the fans back. We obviously did that year, but, you know, they've gone through a relegation into League One. Leicester City is a massive club. It can't be in League One. And, you know, I probably didn't get the expectation. There was quite a few young lads that just wanted to go out and play football and were fearless, and that was why we were so good. And then they had some of the older heads in there that was like, right, these are the standards. This is where we have to be every day. This is what you have to do. And it was a really good blend, and I think that really helped my transition. Matt Oakley, Steve Howard were really good to me, and like I say, Chris Powell as well. So having all three of them entwined, you know, within the base of your team was a real strength and really helped and supported a lot of the young lads, not just myself. Yeah, I think as you get older, and I've been captain at quite a few teams now, and as you get older, I think people look at you as a leader, and I think how you hold yourself goes a long way. It's all well and good you talking about, oh, do this, do that, but if people actually see that action, I think it speaks louder than a word. So I think whenever you're trying to be a leader, how you present yourself, how you work, makes a big difference. Making sure you take care of yourself and what you need to do, firstly, shows a good example for the team. Is a good way to lead, and then you try and support other people. Do your job first and then support other people is imperative to being a good captain, to being a good leader. And yeah, you try and share the knowledge you've had, the experience you've got, and try and lift the expectation and try and lift the standards, because sometimes people haven't seen it. If you haven't come through an academy system maybe, or you have been in an academy system at the very, very top, at Cambridge United, we can't supply that facility. So you have to get the mindset of like, okay, we can't do that, but we can do this. And, trying to get people into that bit of, the club's pushing in the right direction, or this is how we do it here, because every club's different, and trying to use some of the values that you find somewhere else and bring them in to make the team better. And, I think people forget now there's a lot of talk about players individually, IDPs and stuff like that, when people are trying to come through youth systems and get into the first team. But you have to have a good team in there, and I think when young lads make their debuts and they play well, I think it's really important that the team wins, because it makes a big difference on everybody's mindset, and it makes it a more positive environment. So I think people don't realise, some young lads don't realise how much the team affects you as a player. It's not just how you do, it's how your team does and how your teammates do. So yeah, I think I try and, as a leader, I try and bring all that together, as look after myself and then try and look after the next person.
How did that transition from Sheffield Wednesday come about from Leicester City?
Yeah, I sort of got, that was it ended up being a really difficult time that really shaped my career, if I'm honest with you. Leicester, the ownership had come in. I say new at that time. I mean, now same city to say that new top's been there for ages. It's still the same owners now. Obviously, the death of the Top's dad. I can't pronounce his name. Sorry, but his death obviously affected the football club. But when they first came in, they had massive plans. Nigel, they wanted to get there really quickly. Nigel got sacked. Pala Sosa came in. Sven-Goran Eriksson came in. Some really big names. And when they were signing big players, they wanted to get to the Premier League as quick as possible. And I wasn't really in that plans. I knew that, I wasn't probably quite to the level and I wasn't going to get the game time. So when Sheffield Wednesday come about, I thought it was a really good opportunity for me. Again, a massive football club. We're in a decent position in League One. I thought I'll drop down to League One again, get promoted, and then we'll be pushing just like Leicester are. It's another version of that, really. And it did turn out that way. We signed 4 players in that January window, quite young. Didn't really work, and Alan Irvine got the sack, and Gary Megson came in, and he ultimately did a really, really good job at Sheffield Wednesday. Made big decisions, and lots of decisions. Got rid of a lot of players, and I was one of them players that got marginalised a little bit. Really, I'm not sure. My performances weren't up to scratch. I get that. It was a tough time to play at Sheffield Wednesday at that point, because the team wasn't doing very well, and team and the fan base weren't aligned together. And to be fair to Gary, he got them going, but I was one of the casualties off of that. And I was ended up training with the 18s for a little bit of time, and then I was on my way up to training in the April, and around this time, just before Christmas, just before Easter. And I had a phone call off the secretary saying, "Listen, Gary said don't bother coming in. If you're here at the end of the next season, then we'll talk to you then. But as far as we're concerned, you can take the time off." And I was, I'd have been 22, 23 at that time. And it was a real, not a shock, because I knew I wasn't in his plans. But, I went back home, back down to South Cambridge, and had a long 12 weeks off, really. And it refocused my career. And I was at a real crossroad of, where am I going to go with this? Where do I go next? Where's home for me? Where am I going to play? Am I going to get to that championship level again and improve, or am I going to have to drop down the leagues? And fortunately for me, Chris Power got the Charlton job, and they'd had a bit of budget from selling Carl Jenkinson and recruited really a whole new team. And I was lucky to be part of that, and I ended up pushing that through really hard at Sheffield Wednesday and Charlton to get that done, because there was still 3 years left on my contract. I signed a 3.5-year deal contract, so I had 3 years left. And Milan Mandrić was the owner at the time at Sheffield Wednesday, and he'd seen that I'd done well at Leicester and didn't really want to let me go for nothing. And I had to push that through, and we had, it took a little bit longer, but it got done, and I was really pleased to get down to Charlton, and it was a great fit and a brilliant time. But that Sheffield Wednesday was probably that year at Leicester and at Sheffield Wednesday was probably the hardest in my career, and it probably shaped the next few years at Charlton for me, because I was like, well, I don't want to be in that position again, and really refocus me on, I need to make sure that I'm giving everything to football and committed to it.
Before we recorded this podcast, you mentioned that, you're based in the Midlands and you're very much settled there, and you have been for a while. How did you cope with the different moves? Obviously, Charlton, Sheffield Wednesday, from that position at Leicester City. How did you cope with that as a player? Because it's very much glamorised, these big transfers, and you see them on, the TV. But obviously, from a personal point of view, a lot of swapping and changing. Could you give us some insight on how that was dealt with and how you cope with that as an individual?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of players that say how difficult that is, and people just take it with a pinch of salt, but it can be really difficult. Certainly now when I'm older now and I have family, that makes a big difference. But, when I first left Cambridge to go to Leicester, I was buzzing. I was getting a flat on me. I was moving out my mum and dad's. I was getting a flat on my own. I was getting a nice car. I was living the dream. Everybody, 20 years old, my own flat, lovely car, playing for Leicester. I had no problems moving up to Leicester. I loved it. Andy King was somebody I ended up being really close to. There was a few young lads that we'd all go out for dinner, or we'd meet after training and play PlayStation and whatnot. So, at that point when I'm moving clubs, it was no problem. I loved moving to Leicester. Probably the hardest time for me was when I left Birmingham to go to Reading, because, I had children that were in school, and they had to pull them out of school. And I'd done my house in Birmingham, and I was really settled there with my wife. I had friends around the area that weren't just from football; they were from from the local area that were going to live here forever, and we were having to relocate our family down to Reading, where it was somewhere that, okay, it was a lovely place to live, but it wasn't part of our plan or what we were expecting. So that was a completely different dynamic, and I think that is the case for everyone, and that's why transfers are so difficult for everybody. Whenever you sign a player, there is a risk, whether it's because they're from the north and they're moving down south, or vice versa, or it might be from Bristol to Cambridge. These things that go on with your family make a really big difference. And sometimes people are lucky enough to get longer contracts, and you get a bit more security, and you can all go over together with your family. But certainly when you're in League One, League Two, you're getting a year's contract. You might have 2 or 3 kids, and you're like, am I going to move all my family for a year's contract when you might be moving again the following year? So it's certainly the lower you get and the less secure the contracts are, the more difficult it becomes. But when I was young, and I'm open to anything, because you're like, well, I get to live in another city. I've got enough money to buy a nice place, or I've got this, and so it was something that I looked at as an exciting part of my life to go and do. And I was pleased I was able to live around the city and stuff like that. And Leicester's a great city as well, and I really enjoyed my time there.
It's interesting how there's very much a data-driven perspective, from a defensive point of view, from an attacking point of view. If you think of attacking, goals and assists, defensive point of view, clean sheets, etc. But obviously, from what you've just said, it very much relates to that psychological area of mindset, drive, and determination to try and do something. And that can be hard to measure. Do you find that is a limitation when it comes to these areas around, the mindset of an individual, how they've settled, how they see the manager to be the culture of the team? It's just interesting how those areas are not necessarily highlighted enough when it comes to recruitment. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think some people always ask, somebody signs for one player. I think Fernando Torres was a good example. He was at Liverpool, flying, scoring all these goals, and then he moved to Charlton, and the fit just wasn't right, to Chelsea, and the fit just wasn't right for him. He didn't do very well at all. And that is it because he's moved from Liverpool to London, or, but the way the team plays might not necessarily fit his style. There's loads of aspects that go on with that. And, that's why, bringing young players through the club is a lot safer because it's not as expensive and you already know that person and they know the club and what's expected. Whenever you sign a player, no matter how good the player is, if that club doesn't fit or it plays a certain style, it just might not work. And I think you see that a lot where people go, right, this is going to work, this is going to be brilliant, and then get there and you go, well, he's not the same player. Well, he might be playing different, his living circumstances are different, everything like we were talking about, you were saying then with the psychological part of it, has a massive factor in this. So I think a lot of clubs talk about character and doing their due diligence, and that's why, because you're just trying to make sure you're the right fit or they're the right fit for your football club when you're recruiting. And then it's just a gamble. You just never know, do you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting how you mentioned when you go to Charlton, your mindset is, I don't want to repeat the situation that you were in previously. Was that kind of the outlook going on loan and getting those opportunities and your motivation to really pursue, your career and drive your career through maybe those experiences that you've had previously of that unsettlement?
Yeah, I felt like it was a real lifeline for me to have a massive club like Charlton want to sign me. I thought that was a real lifeline and I was really ambitious to do well. And then I wanted to repay Chris as well. I owed him, I felt like I owed him a lot and I wanted to repay his faith. So there was twofold really. I wanted to prove a lot of people wrong that had let me go at Sheffield Wednesday and Leicester that hadn't quite worked for me. And then I wanted to give back to Chris Powell. And then I have to say, when he put such a good team together, we really connected. I speak to a lot of them lads now, and it's always the chicken and the egg one. What came first? So is it we're a good group because we ended up achieving something, or were we a good group and that's why we achieved something? But we had great talent, and underlined and underneath was a real respect for each other and a real camaraderie that goes a long way as a team. And I was really fortunate that the team was so good. Bradley Wright-Phillips, Johnny Jackson, Dale Stevens played in the Premier League, Royce Wiggins played in the Premier League, Ben Hamer played in the Premier League, Jan Kermigan played in the Premier League, and this is the League One team at the time. So people went on and had great careers, and I was lucky to be part of that. And I just wanted to grab it with both hands, like I say, to prove a lot of people wrong, and to give back to Chris because I felt like I owed him that because he gave me that lifeline.
Will Charlton go through those off-the-field issues during that period of when you were there as well, Michael?
Just as I left, really. Roland Duchesne bought the club just as 6 months before I left, and then he was telling Chris who he's got to play, when we got to play. He was the owner at Standard Liège, and he had a Hungarian team, and it was every week there'd be a different person in the canteen that didn't speak English that was coming to play. And some of them were good players, some of them not so good. But like we were saying about that fit as well, like we had a really close-knit team, and it's hard to, if you don't talk the language, and, we knew that they had to be playing, and Chris didn't want to play them, and it got really, really messy. Ultimately, Chris lost his job, and we ended up staying up that year, and I ended up signing a 2-year contract. And then within a few weeks, new manager had come in and decided I wasn't for him. I ended up leaving after playing nearly every game at Charlton. I ended up being not wanted and leaving to Birmingham a few months later off the back of a 2-year deal and a new manager coming in. That's just how crazy football works. It's never, even when you think you know what's going to happen, something will come and blindside you. And you just get used to that, I suppose, as you get older. But yeah, it was tough there. I think that was the beginning of what went on for a long period of time. And it was such a shame because at that point we had a good side that we could have built from. And unfortunately, the wrong owner bought the club.
What do you think that is, Michael? You mentioned the owners and the fact that you were playing, the majority of games. What do you think that comes down to? Is it a recruitment strategy? Is it favouritism? I'm just interested on that process.
Yeah, a new manager came in, so they have different thoughts. Football's game of opinion. Some people like this player, some people like that player, some people think about this thing. So some of that's just opinion-based. And, I probably shot myself in the foot a little bit. We went straight away pre-season, ball came over the top. I missed that ball. Guy went through and scored. It was the first game of pre-season. If you've got some manager that trusts you, that's seen you play every week, they laugh that off and they go, you'll be fine in 6 weeks' time when the season starts. But if it's the first time that manager's seen you, they're going, oh, that's a big red flag. And then, some managers want people that they've had before in especially in that position at centre half. It's a big trusting position. So if they've had somebody before or somebody that they like, then they're going to go for that. And then we had Joe Gomez coming through as well. So maybe that was some of the reason when he went on and played at Liverpool. And, just played again for England recently. So he was coming through. So that was one like, am I blocking him? I was still young enough not to really be seen as somebody to block. But it was a bit of a twofold. The new manager came in and had new opinions, and his opinion of me wasn't high enough.
So you got your move to Birmingham, going out on loan first, and then your permanent move. How did you find your integration going into the football club?
Yeah, I remember when the phone call came. It was beginning of the week. They'd lost 8-0 to Bournemouth. Really difficult game. And then Gary had got the job, Gary Rowett, and my agent had called me and said, "Listen, Birmingham want to take you." And I remember thinking, it's a tough one that. But he only stayed up by the skin of the teeth last year. It was, that Paul Caddis legendary goal. And then Gary wanted to sign me, and I was a bit like, I'm not sure how good the side is. Are we, can I come in and affect it? Can we stay up? I don't want a relegation on my CV. And my agent sort of put to me, and I've heard Gary say this as well. It was, we can't get any worse. If we do go down, they were all already not doing very well. You haven't made it worse, so go and see what happens. And it was right, and it's the best decision I've ever made, by the way. And it wasn't like I was sitting there going, "Oh, I'm not going to come," but it was a question. Yes, it wasn't something I jumped at, and that's me being honest. But I absolutely loved my time. As soon as I got there, I arrived on the Friday, played on the Saturday against Wolves away. Magnificent atmosphere. We ended up getting a 0-0 result, which was as much as a win for us. And then Tuesday night we played it, and Gary's just got the job, and he was talking about it the other day. Again, that game against Watford at home on a Tuesday night under the lights at St Andrews was amazing. First time for me at my home game, and the experience was amazing. We won, I think it was 2 or 3-1 against Watford. Clayton Donaldson scored, and we just clicked. It was like 7 wins out of 10 or something mad like that, and I just loved it, and I felt well when my performance was really good. I was playing next to Paul Robinson, who I really enjoyed playing with. He was a real warrior, a real leader, made me feel comfortable, and I just felt instantly at home. So as soon as we could make that permanent in January, I didn't even wait to see if there was anything else about. I wanted to sign at Birmingham and keep moving with that. Like I say, it just was such a good fit for me. It felt brilliant at the time, and wasn't too far away from Cambridge, where I was based when I was playing at Charlton as well, so we could get up and down, see family, and everything just fitted in a line.
So you mentioned obviously Gary Rowett as the leader, being around good people with Paul Robinson as the captain. Well, I'm interested on what you were like as a leader, Michael. What things do you think you do within that dressing room environment to try and bring a sense of collaboration, bring people together to try and succeed? You mentioned the 8-0 defeat to Bournemouth during that very challenging period on and off the pitch for Birmingham City. What do you do from a leadership point of view that brings people together, tries to build momentum, tries to build morale, motivation? I'm just interested on how you cope with that off the field as well as on the pitch as well.
Well, I was really lucky. I've had 2 really good captains that I try and take stuff off. Obviously at Leicester I was a bit younger, so you don't realise what's going on as such. But when I was at Charlton, we had Johnny Jackson there, and he was a real leader, and I had Paul Robinson as well at Birmingham, and they're both real brilliant leaders, but they led completely different. John was more calmer, but he put everything out in training all the time, as Paul did. But like, he would score important goals, he would make the difference in games. It's harder as a defender to do that. But John really led from the front and was a real example. And Paul did that in his own way, but he couldn't influence games as effectively because he was at the back. It's harder to score the goals, right? And that said to me, how you look after yourself, the pair of them, the way that they did it in their own style, and you have to do it your own way, but it's how you look after yourself, how you go about your business affects other people, because they're looking at you to lead the team. So if you're turning up late, then they think that's acceptable to turn up late. And if you're turning up late, you can't moan at people for being late. If you're being sloppy, then you can't moan at people being sloppy. And other people see that as being acceptable. So how you present yourself and how you lead, look after yourself is really, really important when you're a leader. And from them two, I really took that on. And then I think Paul was really good at, as soon as I signed, he sent me a message. If you need anything, can I help you? And that's something that I've stole off of him. I've been in the area, what you need. Have you got family? Can I give you this? Can you do that? Sending over the fine list so you know where you're going, or, just catching people in the morning and being like, have you got your kit? Do you know where you're going? Have you been sorted out for for whatever's going on. Because when you get to a new club, everywhere is a bit different. So you're just trying to help people feel more comfortable. And then just expectation, every day it's, we don't do that here. It's that culture you're trying to create, and you're trying to bring on people with you as well. You can't just do it on your own. You're trying to influence other people in the dressing room that can influence the rest of the group. So there might be one person that's a big influence on the younger players, and you're trying to influence him and get him to do the right things, because it's going to affect 5 or 6 more people. And it's having a good understanding of the, not the hierarchy, but how people follow each other, and trying to influence the group to make sure that everybody's doing the right thing and pushing in the right direction.
It's interesting how that settlement enabled you to, play your best football under Gary Rowett, and then all of a sudden, Gary leaves the football club. A little bit of a moment out of nowhere, really. I'm just interested in how you cope with that as players. Obviously, being a senior member and being a leader in the dressing room, and being a kind of an effective communicator to kind of bring people together and try to be impactful on the pitch and drive results. How did you cope with that as a team to try and, focus and proceed whilst, the manager sacks out of nowhere, really? And I'm sure all Birmingham fans will, as well as fans alike, will agree with me on that it was a bit of a random sacking. And, obviously I've been fortunate to interview Gary on this podcast previously, and he agrees on that. Just interested from a player's perspective, how that worked and how you cope with that.
Yeah, I think it's well publicised now. Obviously, it was a big shock. We've done well. We'd won in the week. We're near the playoffs. Everybody's sort of thinking, this is going to be a good year for us. Christmas not too far. We'll probably recruit a few more players and we'll see how we go. Obviously, that got cut short. The club had a plan to get rid of Gary, because by the end of, me and Paul Robinson went to meet the chief exec at the time, Panos, and Panos was like, "Don't panic, we've got this thing sorted, blah blah blah. Gianfranco Zola's coming in the next day, and we'll be fine, and life will go on." And they were excited because Gianfranco was such a big name, and he'd done well previously at other places, granted with a different type of team. And it obviously didn't work out like that. It was difficult, and I think change is really difficult. I think the problem that Gianfranco had as well was that I felt that his staff were probably underprepared. He didn't have as much knowledge of the Championship as I think he needed, or of our team that was needed in the short term. I probably would have brought different staff in, and consequently, as the time went on, they probably didn't all seem on the same page. I think that went into some of the team a little bit. And as a player, you feel that, and it's hard to, if you're the lead, you're one of the players, you're leading the group, it's hard to know where to steer the team. Is it that way? Is it this way? And who are you backing almost? So that was quite difficult. And I think, bring back to my point, is that we'd done so well under Gary, the team wasn't ready to change its style, because we're doing well here. Why would we start doing something different? And I've had that in a number of experiences. When I was at Leicester under Nigel Pearson, we missed out in the playoffs, we lost. Following season, Palace Sosa's come in and he wants to play more of an open tile at football and do something different. But the team wasn't ready to do anything different, because we've seen it this way and it's been successful this way. We're not ready for change. Whereas when you've been in a team that's been unsuccessful and somebody comes in and goes, right, we're going to do it this way, everyone's like, right, go on then, we'll do it different because it's not working. So to create change, and I suppose that was, the similar situation with John Eustace, with him getting the sack at Birmingham. The team was doing okay, was doing all right in their own way. They're not ready for change yet. So when that did come about under Wayne, the team probably wasn't as open as what it would have been if they were off the back of 4 or 5 defeats, So it's when clubs try and implement that change, it can be very difficult, and you have to think about the timing and the group and the assets that you've got and how you can use them players the most effectively. And in the short term, that didn't work with Gianfranco, and I think he lost sight of what he was going to do, chopping and changing a little bit, and and buy-in can only be done if you keep winning games, and it's a vicious circle, because what comes first, the buy-in or the game being won, but you need some small wins when you first come into the job, and he didn't get them, and then ultimately he didn't get enough wins over that period of time. And fortunately for us, Harry came in and we stayed up.
How did you find Harry Redknapp? Obviously, those last few games when you had to go away to Aston Villa, and obviously the final game was Bristol City, and there was a 1-0 win. How did you find Harry and the whole process there?
I was injured a lot under Gianfranco. I'd had a hernia operation, and then off the back of that hernia operation, I had to have another 2 operations where the swelling hadn't gone down. And if you know where a hernia is, it's not nice to have a swelling down there. So I missed quite a lot of games under Gianfranco, and then I ended up being back for Harry's last 2 games. I missed the first game at Aston Villa. I was still not fit enough, and we beat Huddersfield second game from the penultimate game of the season, and we thought that was enough. I think Shea had missed the penalty, got sent off. They'd changed 10 men because they knew they were in the playoffs already, so there was a bit of controversy about it. But we won that game, and then we beat Bristol City as well, and it was, we celebrated like we'd won the league. And I remember, seeing people thinking, well, what are they celebrating for? But if you've ever been in that situation, staying up is such a relief. It sits over you. It's such a burden in everyday life that 3 or 4 months normally, all that builds up to that last game of the season where you have to win, and you do. It's just such a relief. It's so hard to describe and put into words, because when you are struggling, it just takes over your life. Football, you just can't help. You'd be sitting at home with your kids and you're thinking about it, taking your kids to school and you're thinking about it. You go, my money might drop, my job security might go, who's going to want me, where's my career going to go, am I still going to be able to play for Birmingham next year? And all them questions, and you procrastinate, and it's really difficult for a long period of time, not just for a week. So when you do win that game, it's such a great feeling, that euphoric togetherness. Although you really underachieved at that time, it's such a relief. So that's why you can see everybody celebrating it at Bristol City away, and it's a really good memory now. But yeah, it was difficult. And then Harry came in, and I really liked Harry, but he had different thoughts of what the club, how they wanted to progress and how he wanted to do it. He wanted to sign lads like Ashley Cole, and Robbie Keane was getting linked to the football club. He had real big names, and they ended up signing 3 lads from Brentford who actually, were really good players in their own right, but they're not the players that Harry had in his vision. He wanted to sign John Terry, Ashley Cole, and Robbie Keane. So when you think of it like that, it's a different type of recruitment that happened, and it was a bit of a shotgun approach. We signed a lot of players on big deals, and some of them worked, some of them didn't, some of them half successful, some of them not so successful. So it was a bit of a scattergun approach, and the club's still struggling from that and having that. We ended up with points deducted further down the line. But I liked Steve as an assistant, and I think the lads were quite excited for Steve to come back into the football club. I got on with him when he was the assistant, and I felt it was a bit, when he got the manager's job, I felt that he was different. I didn't get the same feeling as what I did when he was the assistant. I thought Harry was pretty good at keeping him calm. He can be quite emotional, and it didn't really work out for Steve. And I don't think I'm his biggest fan, and he's my biggest fan, if we're honest.
So when we think about it and we kind of dissect it down, there was, Rowett, there was Zola, there was Redknapp, and then Cotterill. How was your relationship with Steve Cotterill? Because again, a little bit of a different management style. Interesting in terms of how we cope with the media. I think Birmingham fans will agree with that in terms of how we approach that. And obviously he had his backroom staff with him as well. What was that like for you as a player?
Steve was really knowledgeable about the level, and him and Harry really complemented each other really well. I think Harry had a really calming influence on the squad, and Steve's really enthusiastic, lots of energy, really puts his heart into it, and really emotional, and Harry sort of tailored him down a little bit. So I think a few of us were quite keen when he got the job. We're really happy that, after the club deciding to part with Harry, that Steve had got the job. And, I think his character slightly changed. He didn't have that influence, that calming influence of Harry, and Harry having that overall authority, I think was really good for Steve. And, I think he struggled with all the new players. It was still trying to find its way. And yeah, it was a bit of a beast at the time, and probably too much for Steve. And, he's an experienced manager and he's had lots of different jobs, but this was, really different and a big opportunity for him. And unfortunately it didn't work. I think, he couldn't find the right balance within the team. And like I say, he was really emotional, and I think he lost a bit of the connection with the fans and that alignment, and eventually lost his job. And I think there was a few players that felt that they should have been selected under him and didn't get enough game time. And I think he probably picked, if he went back to look at it, he probably picked some of the wrong teams. I think I remember a game against Aston Villa when there was me, Hotter, Shay Adams, Lucas Djukovic all sitting on the bench. And that didn't happen too many times when I was there and we were successful.
Did you notice a change maybe in Steve, if you think about him being assistant with Harry Redknapp and then getting the first team role? I'm just interested in that leadership and management style, if there was a sense of change. Was there things done differently that might have impacted the group as a whole? It's interesting how that management style impacted you as players, Michael.
Yeah, I think it was difficult for me personally. I was trying to be captain. There was lots of new players coming through, but my place in the team wasn't confirmed at that time. There was lots of people that had come in. Harley and Mark Roberts had come in, and ultimately you sign players to improve your team. So, the club obviously felt that them two were going to be playing. Paid a lot of money for both of them. So I was striving to keep my place in the team. So as a captain, when you are in that position and you're trying to lead the team, you're not quite sure where your position is within the group. That was difficult on a personal note. And then, trying to get used to Steve as the manager and having then different conversations. And, obviously he wanted to do it different to what Harry did. Whenever you change manager, it's always difficult. And, style of play changes, but also training changes, what the manager's demanding day to day. And as a leader, that's difficult to pick up on them signals sometimes and get them right. I think whenever there's change, it's not just what goes onto the pitch, it's the other stuff off the pitch as well. Certainly as captain, you're trying to see what's important to the manager and try and influence the squad and make sure that the team understands that as well.
What was it like for you coming towards the end of your time at Birmingham? It was well documented around contract issues. Could you elaborate and give some insight on how that finished?
Yeah, I think it goes the whole year really. When you look at that year, that last year, Gary was in charge Gary Monk was in charge this time after keeping us up quite comfortably the following year, the year before. And then at the beginning of that season, I knew I was out of contract. There was lots of talks about the club being under an embargo. So you sort of waiting to see what's going to happen. I had a conversation with Gary, and Gary was quite honest and motivating. He was like, "Listen, I really like you. It's your opportunity to go and earn a good contract, go and play well, and you'll be fine." So it was focused on me to do my job for that year, which I understood. Especially some of it as well, I'm sure, was that club probably wasn't in a position to offer any contracts out at that point. And then we signed Christian, and that put us Christian Pedersen, and that put us in a difficult position. And I think that hung over us for a little while about how many points are we going to have, what's going on within the football club, and there was a misalignment between what the club could do and what was coming on within the group. And to be fair, we knuckled down and we had a really good season. Shay Adams had a real breakthrough season, ended up scoring over 15 goals, and Lucas Djukovic, one of his most effective years that year. Them two were a real threat up front together, and it was a real exciting season. I went and scored 7 goals myself, which I was really proud of. It's the most I've scored in one of my seasons. So it was a really good season personally. And as I was coming to January, I thought that I'd be playing well enough. I didn't have any conversations with Birmingham because they put it to the end of the season. I had a few different things that had cropped up. One over in the MLS, which I didn't pursue because I thought I was going to get looked after at Birmingham. A couple of games before the season, we played Sheffield United on TV and played really well and got man of the match. And I was up getting given the man of the match award, and I saw Don, and Don was like, "Don't worry, the club's going to look after you. Realise you've got a young family, had a baby on the way in the May." And then got to the end of the season, and you think things are going to be quite straightforward. I wasn't looking for anything that I didn't deserve. I was feeling, we brought lots of players in. I was thinking I was going to get parity. I'd captained the club, played a lot of games that season, scored, a lot of goals, good championship experience, good age. And I suppose, when I look back at it, I'd been offered a 1-year contract, and it was sort of take it or you leave it. And I wasn't expecting that aggressive approach from the football club. And I probably got caught up in a little bit of stuff that was going on above my head with, Christian Speakman and Dom being tight together, and the club trying to move in a slightly different direction or a different plan. Gary Monk and obviously Dong having a bit of, they had a fallout as well. So you kind of felt like I got caught up in that a little bit, not through anything to do with me really. And I was surprised with the starts that was taken. And then, it was one of them where I didn't feel like I could take a year. I felt like I deserved at least 2 years. And I didn't take it. And it was a really difficult decision at the time because I didn't have anything on the table anywhere else. I wasn't expecting to move. My family was settled, and it was probably very fortunate that I did turn it down and ended up signing at Reading. I had a brilliant time at Reading. We were close to achieving something special when we had Veljko Paunovic there, and we just missed out on the playoffs. But it was COVID literally that following season, and I ended up signing at Reading for 2 years. If I'd have took a year's contract at Birmingham, I'd have been out of contract in the peak of COVID when there was lots of uncertainty. So when, you speak to players and they say it's a short career and you've got to look after your families, that's a decision that I look back on and I will use that as an example when I speak to young players. And ironically, my last game just before COVID in front of fans, it was one that I'd earmarked, was back at Birmingham away at St Andrews. And it was the last game before they stopped for COVID, and it was, really brilliant for me to experience saying goodbye to everybody and, getting a nice round of applause from everybody. Because when I left, when my last game was Rotherham, I think it was Rotherham away, and it was Derby at home. I never thought I was going to leave. I didn't know that was going to be my last game at St Andrews. So it was quite emotional for me on that day that I came back at Reading. I took my family out, and Lucas was the captain for Birmingham as well. So it was a really special day for me because I didn't know at the time I'd played my last game for Birmingham at St Andrews.
What are your thoughts on, the current situation now when you think about the new ownership, and you mentioned Dong and that gentleman's agreement that wasn't necessarily put into place? And, we think about it now and the massive excitement there at the club. I'm just interested on what your perspective are on Birmingham City as a whole and where that might go in the future. I'm just interested on your vision and outlook towards that.
Yeah, I mean, when I say, Dong had said, I look after you, don't worry. And, you just read that as that's going to be fine, everything's going to be sorted. But we all know, unless things are in front of you and signed, then it's very, very different. I mean, when you look at it now, it looks really exciting what the football club's trying to do for the city as well, that larger vision, the bigger impact that it's going to make. It's really, really exciting. And, I think they're talking about the academy as well, which is fantastic because it's got a great record of bringing football players through, absolute world-class players. Jude's a shining light for the academy, and I think that we need to build off that. And there's lots of competition in the area. Aston Villa and Wolves are pumping money into their academy. So just to keep up, involving the academy and influencing their facilities is really important. And, it seems really exciting what they're trying to do, and they're here for the long term. And I like the energy that they're bringing, and I think it's where they've just got to be smart, and they look like they've brought in some top executives, football executives into the football club as well, with Mike Rigg just coming in recently as well. So I think it's really exciting. There's a tough spell to go through now for the next week or two, but I think their long-term vision and what they want to do within the football club and the city as a wider vision is really good, and it can only benefit Birmingham City as a whole.
How'd you find Gary Monk, obviously working with him now at Cambridge United? How did you build a relationship up with him, and how are things going at Cambridge United? I presume, obviously, from your past relationship, that has enabled you to kind of work together currently at the moment. How did you find him as a manager? What was he like as a person?
Yeah, I think I was as disappointed for everyone when Gary didn't get another year at Birmingham, or him and whatever happened at Birmingham. I probably was one of the people that ended up in the midst of that at the time with my contract. But I really like Gary. I think he's a top operator. He showed that at a really high level. So to have him at Cambridge in League One is really important. I think he's enjoyed having the job with good owners, with good leadership, which he probably hasn't had over his career, being at Leeds with under, I think it's Collini that's quite notorious. Difficult owner at Sheffield Wednesday, difficult owner. And what I will say about Cambridge United, it's only a small club in comparison to some of them, but it's really, really well run. It's got some really good young people that are making their way in the game that, in a few years that will be operating at a higher level, I believe. It's just had a new training ground, so there's lots of stuff going for it, and I'm sure that's what attracted Gary. So I know what the club's about. I speak to the fan base. Some of them are my friends and family members, so I can give them a bit of an insight about what the club's about, how the owner has been pushed every year, because he was at the football club when we were in the conference, and now we're in League One. So I can sort of help in a little bit with the things that he should be pushing off the pitch, which or the club have recently progressed there. So don't have that argument. Save that for another day. And then connected like any manager, getting used to what the squad's like, how they're motivated, who likes to do what, who likes to play where, and help with that. And I think as you get older, you can participate a little bit more in that. And obviously having that relationship before, we're not starting from scratch.
And just final question then, Michael. So what does the future hold for you in terms of your in terms of what you want to achieve? Obviously coming towards the end of your footballing career, hopefully there's a couple of more years left in you in terms of playing, but have you got any ideas? Is it media? Is it coaching? I'm just interested on that and where the future holds for you.
Yeah, I've been asked this question quite a few times. I think everybody does as they get towards the end of their career, and certainly now everyone talks about planning ahead, and I don't think you can rest on your laurels that you've played so many games that means all of a sudden you're going to get a job somewhere and that you've got friends somewhere. Yeah, you build up a network over 20 years, but you have to have just alongside the playing, you have to have the academic learning as well. So I've tried to do all the courses. I've done the UEFA A license course, the LMA diploma in football management, and I just graduated on my master's degree in sport and directorship. So you try and get a full academic one and put it together with your experience in playing and then your network, so you can step into them opportunities, because you have a plan in football and then in a week's time it changes. But I think at the moment I'm looking at 100%. I want to stay in the game. I love it. I love what I do, and I want to be involved in it for as long as possible. Hopefully playing for as long as I can. But obviously there's a day where you're going to stop, and I'd love to be out on the grass and put them leadership skills into coaching and managing. Really, I think is the route that I'd like to go down. I think I've got a good way of helping people, and I enjoy helping people, and I think I'd like to pass that learning on to other players, and ultimately be somebody that makes decisions on the team and style that we want to play, and how I want that to represent what I was as a player and as a person. So I think that's really exciting, and I see a lot of my friends now that I played with as managers. We played against Bristol Rovers yesterday, and Matt Taylor, I was with him at Charlton, and he's manager at Bristol Rovers now, done a great job there at Rotherham and Exeter as well. So you see friends doing that job, you think, I fancy a bit of that. So yeah, I'd like to see myself in a coaching role, supporting somebody, and then ultimately from there, as you learn more, stepping into that main role.
Michael, I just want to say thank you for doing this podcast. For those listening and watching, there's been a few technical issues, but Michael has been very patient with this. And I
don't think I'll get away with wearing the same shirt. I've tried to wear the same shirt, but I've had a haircut and a little bit of a shave, so I don't know if that'll get away.